What if the solution to a global crisis lay hidden in the most unexpected place? Kaelen stared at the cascading lines of a complex coding error, another mundane glitch in a system far too vast. Then, a garbled support ticket flashed across his screen, adorned with an unusual, unfamiliar script. Meet Kaelen, the unassuming coder whose greatest skill isn't in Python, but in a language almost forgotten. The stale air of the open-plan office was Kaelen's daily perfume, clinging to his cheap headset and the worn edges of his 28-year-old eyes. At his cubicle, a small, quiet island amidst the digital noise, he navigated the endless sea of tech support tickets with practiced efficiency. No one clicking through his automated responses or complaining about slow Wi-Fi would ever guess that Kaelen could effortlessly translate a passage from his grandmother's ancient Mongolian phrasebook, its brittle pages a secret window to a world of nomadic poetry and forgotten wisdom. He was good at his job, efficient, polite, and almost invisible. What if a desperate plea for help was lost in translation until one person understood? The rhythmic hum of the IT call center was suddenly pierced by a frantic, high-pitched squawk. "Anyone got this?" a colleague barked, gesturing at a blinking red line on the console. A woman's voice, rapid and panicked, poured through the speaker, a torrent of guttural sounds completely alien to the English-speaking team. "Sounds like a bad connection," someone mumbled. "Or a prank call." The IT staff exchanged bewildered glances, fumbling for a language identification tool that was already failing. The call was escalating, the desperation in the caller's voice unmistakable, but her words remained an unintelligible wall. The moment Kaelen's forgotten language became the solution no one else could provide. Kaelen felt a prickle of recognition, a faint echo from his grandmother's stories. He leaned forward, his eyes narrowing, the strange cadence stirring something deep within him. "I've got it," he said, his voice quiet but firm, startling his colleagues. He put on his headset, the frantic pleas now directly in his ear. "Sign by na wu. Bitan tu salsh chadna. You bolson be?" He spoke, his Parisian accent flawless and pure, a whisper of the steppe cutting through the digital static. The caller's panicked voice hitched, then melted into profound relief, as Kaelen calmly translated the urgent technical issue. A critical system crash, not a prank. Within minutes, his calm, precise instructions had the caller's system back online. A silent strategist just found her secret weapon, but Kaelen doesn't even know it. Miles away, in a high-tech, sparsely decorated office, General Eva Rostova watched Kaelen through a hidden feed. Her sharp, intelligent eyes, the color of polished steel, were fixed on the unassuming IT tech. He wasn't on her radar a minute ago, but his quiet intervention, his unexpected command of a nearly extinct Mongolian dialect, had just changed everything. She saw the subtle shift in his posture, the quiet competence in his movements. Her lips, thin and unpainted, barely moved as she made a discreet note on her transparent tablet. "Prepare a preliminary file," she commanded softly to an unseen aide, her gaze still intensely focused on Kaelen. He had no idea he'd just stepped onto her chessboard. What if a single moment of brilliance made you question everything about your life? The city lights blurred outside Kaelen's small apartment window, mirroring the disorienting flicker in his mind. He tried to dismiss the frantic call from earlier, the one where he'd effortlessly slipped into a language almost no one else understood. Just a fluke, he told himself. A one-off. But the memory clung to him, a subtle scent of something long forgotten. His gaze drifted to a faded photograph on his cluttered desk. His grandmother, her eyes wise and warm. He picked up an old, leather-bound book beside it, tracing the elegant curves of the ancient Mongolian script. A pang of nostalgia, sharp and bittersweet, twisted in his gut. This life, his life, felt so far removed from the stories she used to tell. Stories of wind-swept steppes and deep traditions. A mysterious package arrives, promising a new life or a dangerous trap. What would you do? The quiet introspection was shattered by a sudden, insistent knock at his apartment door. Kaelen frowned, checking the time. Who would be here this late? He opened it cautiously to find a courier, impassive and professional, holding out an unmarked, sleek, black envelope. It felt heavy, expensive, unlike anything he'd ever touched. No sender, no return address, just a simple, elegant silver seal, a stylized winged horse. His fingers trembled slightly as he broke it. Inside, 2 items. A thick, black security clearance pass, its silver crest gleaming, and a single sheet of matching stationery. The handwriting was stark, decisive, a bold script in silver ink. Mr. Kaelen Butbayar. Your unique skills are urgently required. A vehicle will collect you tomorrow at 0800 hours. Classified location. This is not a request. It is an imperative. Kaelen gasped, the paper crinkling in his trembling hand. Your best friend says it's a trap. A mysterious invitation says it's your destiny. Who do you trust? His roommate, Liam, a pragmatic data analyst with a perpetually skeptical eyebrow, found Kaelen staring at the contents on the coffee table. Whoa, what's this? A Black Ops recruitment flyer? Liam picked up the pass, his eyes widening. High-level security clearance? Classified location? He read the note, then looked at Kaelen, his mouth agape. Kaelen, what is this? This is every red flag in the book. This is how horror movies start. Or, like, a really bad spy novel where you end up in a ditch. Liam began pacing the small living room. A mysterious summons from an unknown entity? No contact number. How did they even get your address? This is creepy, man. Seriously creepy. Kaelen ran a hand through his hair. I know. But your unique skills are urgently required. He saw. She saw. Whoever sent this. Liam scoffed. Or some weirdo has a fetish for IT techs who speak obscure languages. You don't know anything about them. What if the cost of staying safe was the death of your soul? The question hung heavy in the air, unnerving. How come did they know where he lived? The ease with which his anonymity had been pierced was terrifying. But beneath the fear, something else stirred. A wild, dangerous hope. Kaelen looked around the cramped apartment, at the peeling paint on the walls, the stack of overdue bills on the counter. He thought of his worn IT uniform, hanging by the door, smelling faintly of stale coffee and electronic dust. This was his reality. It was safe, predictable, and it was slowly suffocating him. He thought of his grandmother's stories, of a life rich with purpose and connection, not just lines of code and forgotten dialects. He was a cog, not a bridge. The note felt like a command, but also a challenge to be more than he had become. He chose the terrifying unknown over the suffocating familiar. Was it courage or madness? Kaelen reread the cryptic note, the silver script glinting in the faint, pre-dawn light. The fear was real. Liam's warnings were logical. But the pull of the unknown, the intoxicating possibility of escape, was stronger. It was the most terrifying decision of his life. He looked at the black envelope, clutching it like a talisman. He took a deep breath, the words tasting strange and foreign on his tongue. I think I have to go, he whispered to the silence of the apartment. I have to know. Burning bridges can be terrifying, but sometimes they're the only way forward. The next morning, Kaelen found his fingers hovering over the phone, the number for IT management staring back at him. His manager, Mr. Davies, was notorious for his casual dismissal of employees, seeing them as interchangeable cogs. Kaelen imagined the annoyance in his voice, the quick, forgettable goodbye. But as he finally dialed and left a concise, almost formal resignation message, a surprising lightness bloomed in his chest. It wasn't just relief. It was a defiant, exhilarating tremor. The thought that yesterday would have bothered him immensely felt strangely liberating today. He hung up, a small, knowing smile playing on his lips. His old life was already fading. When you embark on the impossible, your true allies reveal themselves. Liam watched Kaelen stuff his meager belongings into a scuffed, old duffel bag. His friend's face was a storm of worry. I'm serious, Kaelen, Liam insisted, his voice tight with concern. I've put a tracking app on your phone. Don't you dare turn it off. And I want you to check in with me every 3 hours. If I don't hear from you, I'm calling the embassy, the UN, the CIA. I swear to God. Kaelen hugged his friend tightly, a grateful warmth spreading through him. I'll be careful, Liam. I promise. It was a moment of fierce, unwavering loyalty, a final anchor before he plunged into the unknown. A black car arrived, signaling the end of one life and the beginning of another. Would you get in? Precisely at 10 a.m., a sleek, black-armored Mercedes-Benz S-Class sedan, so silent it seemed to materialize from the morning mist, glided to a stop outside their apartment building. A chauffeur, impeccably dressed in a crisp black suit, stepped out. He didn't ask for Kaelen's name. His gaze, however, swept over Kaelen with an unnerving precision before he simply nodded and opened the rear door. "Mr. Enkbat," he said, his voice a low, polite rumble. "We are ready when you are." Kaelen felt a shiver of awe and apprehension as he confirmed, his voice a little shaky. "Yes, that's me." The tinted windows already sealed him off from the familiar world. From IT cubicle to private jet, Kaelen's journey into a world he never knew existed. The ride was silent, smooth, and utterly surreal. They didn't go to a civilian airport. Instead, the vehicle swept onto a private tarmac where a Gulfstream G650 gleamed under the morning sun. Inside, the jet was a study in understated luxury, cream leather, polished mahogany. Kaelen was the only passenger. As the plane surged forward, pressing him back into the plush seat, he stared out the window. New York City shrank below his apartment, his cubicle, his old life, all vanishing into a hazy memory. He was untethered, suspended between worlds, a poached salmon and asparagus with hollandaise, served by a polite flight attendant, a stark contrast to his usual sad desk lunch. He just arrived at a place that doesn't exist on any map. His new life is about to begin. 7 hours later, as the jet began its descent, the landscape below wasn't a glittering city, but a sprawling, secluded military airfield. Barbed wire fences stretched into the distance, watchtowers pierced the sky, and armed guards moved with practiced efficiency. There was no customs line, no chaos. Kaelen was escorted directly from the plane to another waiting armored vehicle. It plunged them into a series of stark concrete tunnels, deeper and deeper, until they emerged into a vast, heavily guarded underground facility. The air grew heavy with the hum of unseen machinery and a palpable sense of secrecy. This wasn't just a new job. It was a labyrinth, and he was already at its heart. What if the solution to a global crisis lay hidden in the most unexpected place? Kaelen was led through a maze of stark, gleaming corridors, the air cool and silent, until he entered a vast chamber that hummed with a quiet, terrifying power. Holographic displays flickered on transparent screens, showing shifting strategic maps, lines of force, and glowing data points. In the center, behind a minimalist console, stood General Eva Rostova. She was shorter than he expected, but her presence filled the room like a cold front. Her dark uniform was impeccably tailored, and her graying hair was pulled back in a severe, no-nonsense bun. Her eyes, sharp and intelligent, met Kaelen's, and he felt a primal instinct to shrink. "Mr. Kaelen." Her voice was a calm, low baritone, utterly devoid of warmth. "Welcome. I trust your journey was enlightening." Kaelen stammered. It was certainly different from my usual commute, General." A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched her lips. "Indeed, your usual commute, as you call it, yielded a unique asset. We have an urgent, sensitive diplomatic crisis. And your specific talent, Mr. Kaelen, is precisely what we need." He felt a jolt of both fear and an unfamiliar thrill. His IT skills had never been called a unique asset by anyone, let alone a general. One isolated king, a forgotten language, and the fate of nations hanging in the balance. General Rostova gestured to the largest holographic display, which shimmered into a detailed satellite image of a vast, remote territory. "This is the autonomous region of Kaelen, rich in rare earth minerals, strategically vital. And this," she tapped a point on the map, and an austere, unsmiling face materialized, "is King Batu, ruler for 40 years, a traditionalist, a fiercely independent leader, and profoundly distrustful of outsiders." A junior analyst, barely visible in the corner, murmured, "He hasn't spoken directly to any foreign envoy in over a decade, General. All attempts have failed." Their interpreters are useless. Rostova's gaze remained fixed on Kaelen. King Batu believes any attempt at negotiation is a thinly veiled threat. He refuses to engage. His isolation is causing escalating geopolitical instability. Sanctions are failing. Military options are undesirable. But the situation is escalating, Mr. Kaelen, and we believe you possess the key to unlocking his trust. Kaelen felt the immense weight of her words. The chilling reality that this wasn't just about fixing a server, a seasoned diplomat versus an IT tech. The battle for Kaelen's credibility begins. The general led Kaelen into an adjacent conference room, where a man in an impeccably tailored suit sat, radiating an aura of weary disdain. This was Ambassador Thorn, his face etched with the lines of countless diplomatic battles. His eyes, the color of gunmetal, swept over Kaelen. General, with all due respect, I fail to see the purpose of bringing in a civilian, especially one whose expertise lies in troubleshooting network issues, Thorn stated, his voice a polished, dismissive instrument. This is a delicate diplomatic mission, not a server reboot. Kaelen felt a hot flush of embarrassment, but Rostova intervened smoothly. Ambassador, Mr. Kaelen possesses a rare linguistic and cultural fluency that our seasoned diplomats have consistently failed to leverage. Thorn scoffed. Fluency in a dead dialect, General? Are we sending him in to read ancient poetry? This is a negotiation about resources and security, not a cultural exchange program. He fixed Kaelen with a stare. What exactly do you bring to this table, young man, besides a good ear for obscure languages? Kaelen, though shaken, met his gaze. Perhaps, Ambassador, he said quietly, an understanding of what makes a man like King Batu listen. From fixing printers to preventing war, Kaelen's imposter syndrome hits hard. Back in his assigned quarters, a Spartan room with a single cot and a desk, Kaelen stared at the stacks of classified documents. Files on King Batu's lineage, historical grievances, cultural protocols. The sheer volume was overwhelming. He, Kaelen, the guy who reset passwords and debugged code, was supposed to navigate this labyrinth of international intrigue? He ran a hand through his hair, the weight of the task pressing down on him. This was so far beyond his experience, so alien to his quiet life. He was a fraud, an accidental tourist in a world of generals and ambassadors. What could he possibly offer? The question echoed in the silent room, a cold, unsettling whisper of self-doubt. Why did a top general bet the world on a quiet coder? Her secret strategy revealed. Later that night, in her own office, General Rostova reviewed Kaelen's hastily compiled background file. His academic records, his grandmother's Mongolian heritage, his quiet but meticulous nature. She paused at a note on his cultural studies, an elective he'd taken in college. They don't speak his language, she murmured to herself, her voice barely a whisper in the quiet room. And I don't mean the dialect. They speak power. They speak economics. But King Batu speaks tradition. He speaks honor. He speaks the language of his ancestors. A subtle smile touched her lips as she looked at Kaelen's photo. Sometimes, the softest touch is the most powerful weapon. She was taking a calculated risk, betting on humanity over hardware. What if every attempt to solve a problem only made it worse? In the secure briefing room, the air hung heavy with the ghosts of past failures. Holographic projections flickered, displaying a grim parade of diplomatic blunders. Kaelen, General Rostova, Ambassador Thorn, and a handful of other analysts watched as scene after scene unfolded. There was the German envoy, presenting a meticulously crafted economic proposal to King Batu, only to be met with a stony silence and a dismissive wave. Then a charismatic UN delegate, offering humanitarian aid with a grand flourish, inadvertently violated a subtle protocol of ancestral offerings, causing the king to abruptly end the meeting. They just kept pushing their own agendas, one analyst muttered, rubbing his temples. Never really listened. Thorn scoffed, arms crossed. They spoke the language of reason. The king merely chooses not to hear it. He shot a sidelong glance at Kaelen, a silent, "I told you so," hanging in the air. Kaelen, however, remained silent, his gaze fixed on King Batu's angry, unyielding face on screen, not seeing a madman, but a man profoundly misunderstood. Every attempt failed. Every expert sent home. Could Kaelen be different? After the grim review, as the other analysts dispersed, Thorne cornered Kaelen by the projection screen. His impeccably tailored suit seemed to loom over Kaelen's slightly rumpled civilian clothes. "Look, Mr. Beaumont," Thorne began, his voice a low, cutting whisper. "I appreciate General Rostova's experimental approach. But this isn't some IT glitch you fix with a reboot. This is high-stakes diplomacy. You have no corporate experience, no background in international law. You're a social experiment, nothing more." He gestured dismissively at the screens. "You served pie yesterday, figuratively speaking. How do you propose to succeed where seasoned diplomats have failed for years?" The insult landed like a physical blow. Kaelen felt a hot flush of anger, his hands clenching under the table, but he remembered his grandmother's teaching. Strength is not in the shout, but in the quiet stone. He met Thorne's gaze, his voice steady. "They failed because they didn't speak the king's language, Ambassador. And I don't mean Mongolian. He's just an IT guy," they said. But Kaelen was about to prove them all wrong. Back in his Spartan quarters, the weight of Thorne's words and the immense task ahead pressed down on him. But it also ignited a spark. If conventional methods had failed, then unconventional insight was their only hope. Kaelen pushed aside the tactical maps and economic reports, focusing instead on the thick dossier on King Batu's family, his lineage, his people's history, their traditions, their very soul. He pored over ancient texts, their ornate script a familiar comfort. He cross-referenced historical events with his grandmother's stories, tales of nomadic honor, the sacredness of hospitality, the subtle language of offerings. He saw photos of traditional ceremonies, intricate patterns, and symbols. While others studied strategy, Kaelen studied the soul of a people. He made notes in his grandmother's archaic Mongolian script, connecting fragmented pieces of information, feeling a growing sense of purpose. He wasn't just reading history, he was reliving it, searching for the unseen threads that bound King Batu to his past. The one small detail that could change everything, Kaelen just found it. Hours blurred into a single, intense night. As dawn broke, painting the small window in his quarters with a faint, hopeful light, Kaelen's eyes widened. He had been studying a faded, centuries-old chronicle of tribal customs, a digital scan provided in the dossier. A specific passage, almost an aside, detailed a protocol for first contact with a revered elder or chieftain, an unspoken expectation of a symbolic, non-material offering, a gift of respect for the land and its people, presented before any words were exchanged. It wasn't about monetary value or geopolitical leverage, it was about honor. He flipped through the records of previous negotiations. Every single one had started with greetings, then immediately launched into proposals, charts, and demands. No one had offered a true gift of respect. They had all inadvertently insulted the king from the very first moment. A jolt of electricity ran through him. This wasn't a trick, it was the foundation, the missing piece. He's no diplomat, he's no soldier, but Kaelen just realized he might be the only one who can save them. Kaelen walked to the small window, gazing out at the distant, anonymous horizon. The magnitude of his discovery settled over him. It was a single, fragile thread in a tapestry of complex geopolitics. But it was a thread no one else had seen. Fear still gnawed at him, a cold knot in his stomach. He was just Kaelen, the IT guy who spoke a forgotten dialect. But he also carried the echoes of his grandmother's wisdom, the stories of a people who valued honor and tradition above all else. He looked at the vast, anonymous landscape, then back at his worn hands, feeling a quiet surge of resolve. He might not be a diplomat, or a soldier, or a general, but he understood. And in this world, understanding might be the most powerful weapon of all. He had to try. From IT manuals to ancient rituals, Kaelen's crash course in diplomacy is unlike anything you've seen. The next days blurred into a grueling, high-speed immersion. Kaelen moved from one secure training room to another, his mind a sponge. He practiced the intricate bowing rituals of King Batu's court in a simulated environment, his once clumsy movements growing precise. Training specialists, initially accustomed to teaching rote phrases, found themselves surprised by Kaelen's intuitive grasp of the language's subtleties. No, not just, hello, Kaelen would correct, demonstrating a specific inflection, but a greeting that acknowledges the other's lineage and position. It's a subtle difference, but crucial for respect. He spent hours listening to historical recordings, deciphering the nuances of dialect, and internalizing the ancient proverbs his grandmother had often recited. He wasn't just learning words, he was learning a way of being. His natural talent, long dormant, now blazed. Kaelen just challenged the old guard. The future of diplomacy hangs in the balance. The final strategy meeting was a stark contrast to Kaelen's quiet studies. Ambassador Thorn, crisp in his tailored suit, dominated the conference room. He presented a negotiation plan, bristling with economic leverage points, trade sanctions, and geopolitical threats, a rigid, conventional approach. "We demonstrate our strength," Thorn asserted, tapping a laser pointer on a complex chart. "And King Batu will respond to reason." Kaelen felt the familiar clench of anxiety, but a different feeling, a quiet resolve, began to stir. He cleared his throat. "Ambassador," Kaelen began, his voice steady. "With all due respect, I believe a different approach is necessary," Thorn scoffed. "And what would an IT technician know about international diplomacy, Mr. Beaumont?" Kaelen met his gaze. "I know that King Batu values honor above profit and heritage above power. Our best leverage isn't economic, it's cultural understanding. We must offer a gift of respect, not a threat of consequence." General Rostove watched, her expression unreadable, her gaze shifting between the two men. The general just gave Kaelen the green light. The mission is officially on. The room held its breath after Kaelen's bold statement. Thorn's face was a mottled shade of red, a mixture of fury and humiliation. "This is a multi-billion-dollar strategic imperative, General," Thorn sputtered, appealing to Rostova, "not a cultural exchange program." Rostova remained silent for a beat, her eyes piercing. Then, she raised a firm hand, cutting Thorn off. "Ambassador," she said, her voice calm but decisive, "we have tried your methods. They have failed. Mr. Beaumont's approach offers the only path forward that has not yet been exhausted." She turned her gaze to Kaelen, and for a fleeting moment, a small, almost imperceptible nod passed between them. Kaelen felt a surge of validation, a quiet triumph. Thorn, defeated, slumped back into his chair, a thunderous scowl on his face. The mission was officially Kaelen's. The mission is launched. Kaelen is heading into the unknown, carrying the hopes of nations. Hours later, the hangar doors rumbled open, revealing a specialized transport aircraft, sleek and formidable under the harsh lights. Kaelen, now dressed in a practical, dark jumpsuit provided by the facility, boarded alongside General Rostova, a silently fuming Ambassador Thorn, and a small, elite team. The air inside the cabin was thick with unspoken tension, the gravity of their mission pressing down on everyone. Kaelen found a window seat, strapping himself in. Below him, the vast, anonymous landscape of the military base stretched out, a final tether to the world he knew. He looked at the determined faces of the soldiers and strategists around him. He was no longer just an IT tech. He was an improbable, indispensable piece of a complex geopolitical puzzle. The engines roared to life, a deep, vibrating hum. This was it. The point of no return, Kaelen's final call home before stepping into the lion's den. Will he make it back? Mid-flight, suspended above the clouds, Kaelen pulled out a secure comms device. He had one last check-in, a lifeline to his old life. "Hey, Liam," he whispered into the mic, the signal surprisingly clear. Liam's anxious voice crackled back. "Kaelen! Are you okay? Where are you? The tracking app shows you in the middle of nowhere." Kaelen managed a small, fleeting smile. "I'm fine, Liam. On my way. Just a very important project. I'll check in again when I can." "You better," Liam retorted, a worried edge to his tone. "I swear, if I don't hear from you, I'm calling every embassy and alien abduction hotline I can find." Kaelen chuckled, a sound that felt foreign and fragile in the dark cabin. "I'll be careful, promise." He hung up, the silence of the plane settling back around him. Liam's worry was a comforting anchor, a reminder of the personal stakes amidst the enormity of the mission. Beyond the maps, beyond civilization, Kaelen's journey into the king's hidden realm. The armored vehicles rumbled over what could barely be called roads, deep into a landscape that swallowed the horizon whole. Towering, jagged mountains clawed at the sky, their peaks dusted with snow even in this unseasonable warmth. Dust, fine as flour, coated everything, clinging to the tinted windows and invading the air in the pressurized cabin. Kaelen stared out, a profound sense of unreality settling over him. This wasn't the sterile world of servers and code. This was the raw, untamed steppe his grandmother had spoken of, a land where ancient nomadic markers, cairns of sun-bleached stones, still dotted the desolate plains. He imagined the thundering hooves, the endless sky, the fierce spirit of a people woven into this harsh beauty. A tremor, half awe, half trepidation, ran through him. In the land of his ancestors, Kaelen finds the strength he needs to face a king. When the convoy halted for the night, establishing a temporary encampment under a sky so vast and star-dusted, it felt like a celestial tapestry. Kaelen slipped out from the buzzing, high-tech vehicles. The cold, crisp air bit at his cheeks, carrying the scent of dry earth and distant pines. He looked up the Milky Way, a brilliant smear across the black, and felt a profound connection to something elemental. His grandmother's voice echoed in his mind. Asterisk. Respect the land, Kaelen. It remembers those who walk it and those who forget. He closed his eyes, drawing a deep breath. This wasn't just a mission anymore. It was a pilgrimage, a step into the stories that had shaped him, a chance to honor the wisdom of his lineage. A quiet resolve settled in his chest, calming the frantic beat of his heart. He just arrived at the unbreachable fortress of a king who trusts no one. The real game begins. After days of relentless travel, the convoy finally crested a ridge. Below them, nestled in a natural basin and protected by sheer cliff faces, stood King Batu's compound. It was a formidable sight. Massive wooden gates, reinforced with iron, rose from stone walls that looked as old as the mountains themselves, yet integrated with subtle modern defenses. They were met by a line of King Batu's guards, stern-faced men in traditional leather armor, but with modern rifles slung over their shoulders. Their posture was rigid, their gaze is unwavering. General Rostova stepped forward, offering a formal, precise greeting in the local dialect. The lead guard's response was terse, his eyes sweeping over the outsiders with cold suspicion. Kaelen, standing a step behind, felt the weight of centuries of isolation and distrust pressing down on them. Every detail tells a story. Kaelen is the only one who can read it. They were led through a labyrinthine series of courtyards, each one a testament to King Batu's blend of ancient heritage and austere authority. Ornate carvings depicted mythical beasts and ancestral heroes. Colorful banners with intricate patterns fluttered from tall poles, and the very air smelled of wood smoke and dried herbs. King Batu's people went about their daily lives, but their eyes, sharp and watchful, followed the outsiders. Ambassador Thorn muttered a comment about the efficiency of their security, but Kaelen noticed a small, hand-painted symbol on a prayer flag. A subtle variant of a blessing for safe passage, reserved only for honored guests, or perhaps for those about to face a significant test. It was a detail no one else seemed to register, a whisper of meaning in a world of stone and silence. Tomorrow, Kaelen faces the king. The fate of nations rests on his forgotten tongue. In the austere guest chamber, the air crackled with anticipation. General Rostova and Ambassador Thorn meticulously reviewed their final points, Thorn still casting sidelong glances of doubt at Kaelen. "Just remember," Thorn said, adjusting his tie with a practiced hand, "King Batu values directness. No esoteric metaphors, please." Rostova offered Kaelen a quick, encouraging glance that acknowledged Thorn's jab but dismissed it. Kaelen, meanwhile, sat quietly, his worn notebook open to pages filled with his grandmother's script, and his own meticulous notes on King Batu's lineage, his favorite poets, the nuances of his dialect. He closed his eyes, practicing the traditional greeting, the subtle inflection, the precise bow. He was nervous, yes, but beneath it, a current of fierce resolve flowed. He had to know if his bridge could hold. The moment Kaelen came face to face with the legendary King Batu, can he break through? The massive oak doors of King Batu's audience chamber swung inward with a low groan, revealing a space that felt less like a room and more like a hallowed, ancient cavern. Tapestries depicting mythical beasts and ancestral warriors hung from the soaring stone walls, their colors muted by centuries. At the far end, on a dais carved from dark polished wood, sat King Batu. He was a formidable figure, draped in intricately embroidered silks, his face a stern, unyielding mask beneath a high, feathered headdress. Armed guards, silent and imposing in traditional armor, flanked his throne. Kaelen's hands, hidden in the folds of his simple tunic, trembled ever so slightly. General Rostova and Ambassador Thorn offered formal bows, their voices tight as they delivered stilted greetings through the official translator. King Batu merely inclined his head, his dark eyes sweeping over them, lingering for a fraction of a second on Kaelen, before settling back into an unreadable gaze. The air was thick with tension, heavy as the silence that followed. Same old tactics, same old failure. King Batu is about to shut them down again. Ambassador Thorn, ever the picture of practiced diplomacy, stepped forward. His voice, usually so smooth and persuasive, now seemed to echo flatly in the vast chamber. He launched into his carefully rehearsed address, speaking of mutual benefit, regional stability, and the technological advancements his nation could offer. Charts and projections, displayed on a sleek tablet, flashed briefly in the hands of a junior aide. Thorn gestured, his movements precise, his words polished, but Kaelen could feel the invisible wall rising between the diplomat and the monarch. King Batu listened, his face an impenetrable mask, his eyes half closed. There was no flicker of interest, no change in his rigid posture. His advisors exchanged quiet glances, a subtle shake of the head from one, a dismissive sigh from another. It was a familiar pattern, Kaelen realized, just as he'd seen in the briefing videos. Thorn was speaking a language of logic and self-interest, but it wasn't the language King Batu understood. It's over. The mission failed, unless Kaelen makes his move. As Thorn concluded, a tense silence descended. The ambassador offered a hopeful, if strained, smile, awaiting a response. King Batu, however, remained impassive. He raised a hand, a subtle gesture that brought the official translator forward. The translator's voice, a monotone drone, relayed the king's words. These are empty words. They speak of numbers and machines, but not of the land, nor of the spirit. They lack respect for what has been, and what will always be. This audience is concluded. Thorn's face went slack, his jaw dropping in disbelief. General Rostova, though her expression remained controlled, clenched her fists at her sides, a vein throbbing faintly in her temple. Guards shifted, their movements suggesting the imminent escort of the delegation. The mission, Kaelen knew, was failing, just as every attempt before it. A cold dread settled in his stomach. This was it. The wall of silence was impenetrable. Kaelen just spoke, and the king listened. The impossible just happened. A desperate urge seized Kaelen. He met General Rostova's gaze, and in her eyes he saw a question, a silent permission. He took a deep breath, the ancient Mongolian proverb about the strength of a quiet voice echoing in his mind. As the guards began to subtly usher the delegation, Kaelen stepped forward, a small, hand-carved wooden horse clutched in his slightly trembling hand. He bowed. A deep, traditional bow, far lower and more reverent than Thorn's. Then, in the ancient melodic dialect of his grandmother, he spoke. "Your Majesty," he began, his voice clear and resonant. "Forgive my interruption. My ancestors taught me that when approaching a great leader, one must first offer a gift of the heart, a symbol of shared heritage, not of material gain. This humble horse, carved from the wood of the steppe, represents the spirit of our nomadic forefathers, a spirit of freedom and enduring strength." Thorn stared, stunned into silence. King Batu's eyes, previously so cold, widened imperceptibly. He didn't just speak a language, he spoke to a soul. Kaelen just unlocked the king. King Batu's stern mask softened. A flicker of surprise, then respect, ignited in his dark eyes. He leaned forward, his gaze fixed on Kaelen, completely bypassing his official translator. "You speak the old tongue," the king said, his voice deep and resonant, directly to Kaelen. "And you understand the old ways." He waved a dismissive hand at his translator. "He may leave. Continue, young one." The shock in the room was palpable. Thorn's jaw remained slack, his eyes darting between Kaelen and the king, utterly bewildered. General Rostova, however, offered Kaelen a subtle, approving gaze, a silent acknowledgement of the breakthrough. Kaelen felt a surge of adrenaline, replacing his fear with a fragile, yet powerful, hope. He had spoken not just a language, but to a soul. The impossible had just happened. He was no longer just an IT tech. He was a bridge. Kaelen isn't just a translator. He's building a bridge between two worlds. Days later, the rigid formality of the audience chamber had given way to the soft glow of a private tea ceremony. The air, once thick with tension, now hummed with a delicate balance of respect and growing understanding. Kaelen, seated between King Batu and General Rostova, felt like a living conduit, his voice weaving intricate patterns between their two distinct worlds. When Rostova spoke of strategic alliances and resource sharing, Kaelen didn't just translate the words. He reframed them, speaking in the ancient dialect of partnership and shared legacy, of safeguarding ancestral lands for future generations. He spoke of the sacred bond between those who tend the earth and those who protect it. King Batu, once a stone fortress of suspicion, now listened, his deep eyes engaged, a rare smile touching his lips as Kaelen rephrased Rostova's proposals into terms of mutual honor. General Rostova, observing Kaelen's masterful navigation, offered subtle, appreciative glances, a silent acknowledgement of his unique power. A quiet coder just brokered peace. This is how history is made. A week had passed, filled with further intimate discussions, each step carefully guided by Kaelen's cultural insights. Now, back in the grand audience chamber, the atmosphere was charged not with tension, but with triumph. King Batu, his regal presence softened by genuine respect, sat opposite General Rostova. Before them, a scroll of parchment lay open, awaiting their seals. Kaelen stood quietly to the side, a silent architect, his heart thrumming with a profound sense of accomplishment. The agreements were signed, establishing new terms of cooperation that honored both King Batu's heritage and Rostova's strategic objectives. As their hands met in a firm, symbolic handshake, King Batu turned to Kaelen, his stern face breaking into a rare, warm smile. "You have woven a strong rope between our mountains," he said directly in his dialect, his voice resonant with gratitude. Rostova, too, met Kaelen's gaze, a flash of profound relief and approval in her eyes. The biggest skeptic just became Kaelen's greatest admirer. His true worth is finally seen. The journey back on the transport plane was a different experience entirely. The air was light, filled with a subdued buzz of success. As Kaelen looked out at the receding landscape, Ambassador Thorn, who had been conspicuously silent, approached. He stopped beside Kaelen, his impeccably tailored suit, a stark contrast to Kaelen's still slightly rumpled travel clothes. "Kaelen," Thorn began, his voice devoid of its usual condescension, a hint of genuine humility in its tone. "I owe you an apology. I was wrong. Completely wrong about your capabilities." He extended a hand, a gesture Kaelen hadn't expected. "You didn't just translate words. You translated worlds." Kaelen met his gaze, a quiet confidence now firmly rooted within him, and shook the ambassador's hand. From across the cabin, General Rostova watched, a proud, knowing smile gracing her lips. The shift in dynamics was palpable. From IT tech to diplomatic leader, Kaelen's wildest dream just came true. Or did it? Back at headquarters, the sterile efficiency of General Rostova's office felt a universe away from King Batu's ancient halls. Rostova, her expression unreadable, gestured for Kaelen to sit. "Kaelen," she began, her voice calm and authoritative, "what you accomplished was extraordinary. Unprecedented. You are not just a bridge, you are an architect." She slid a sleek data slate across the desk. "I am offering you a position, Director of Cultural Integration for Strategic Diplomatic Missions. A generous salary, housing in a diplomatic residence, and unlimited resources for any further linguistic or cultural studies you desire." Kaelen stared at the proposal, his mind reeling. It was everything he'd ever passively yearned for, A life beyond his wildest dreams. The dull ache of his old life, the smell of stale coffee, the endless lines of code, all replaced by purpose, recognition, and a global stage. Rostova watched him, an expectant glint in her sharp eyes. He didn't just take the offer, he rewrote it. Kaelen just became the hero of his own story. The silence in the office stretched, thick with the weight of Kaelen's decision. This was the culmination, the reward for his courage. But something had shifted within him. He wasn't the same quiet coder who had stumbled into this world. He had found his voice, his purpose, and his worth. He looked at the proposal, then up at General Rostova, a new, confident resolve in his eyes. "General," he said, his voice steady and clear, "thank you. It's an incredible offer. But I have a counter-proposal." Rostova raised an eyebrow, a flicker of surprise and then keen interest in her gaze. "I don't want this job as a gift," Kaelen continued, standing tall. "I want you to invest in me as a partner. I want to lead the next cultural integration initiative. Give me a budget and a dedicated team. And I want a performance-based contract. If I succeed in expanding our diplomatic reach through cultural understanding within 2 years, I want a stake in the success of that division. And I'll pay for my own studies with the salary you give me." He was asking for agency, for the right to build, not just to be assigned. Rostova stared, her initial surprise slowly melting into a broad, brilliant smile, the first Kaelen had ever seen truly transform her face. "A former IT tech who just brokered peace is now negotiating equity with me," she chuckled softly. "Kaelen, I knew my instincts were right about you. I just had no idea how right." She extended her hand, a new, stronger handshake this time. "You have a deal. Welcome to a new foundation."